It's really exciting because 3 years ago, if somebody said, can you make a computer system that writes a 15-page report on a company that we want to underwrite, people would go, no, that's not possible. And now we're doing it, and we actually have some of it in production.
Hi, my name is Dimitri Panici, and I'm a content creator, agency owner, and AI enthusiast. You're listening to the AI Agents Podcast, brought to you by Jotform, and featuring our very own CEO and founder, Ida Tank. This is the show where artificial intelligence meets innovation, productivity, and the tools shaping the future of work. Enjoy the show. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the AI Agents Podcast. In this episode, we have Magnus Revang. How are you doing, Magnus?
I'm doing fine. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's very nice to have you as well. You are the Openstream. Do you guys go by Openstream or Openstream.ai? Everyone wants to.
Well, we used to be Openstream, and now we're Openstream.ai.
Of course, yes. You need to have the .ai at the end in order to have validity. No, from Openstream.ai, you're the Chief Product Officer. I'd love to hear a little bit more, first and foremost, about your story, how you got into AI in the first place, and then how necessarily, what necessarily Openstream.ai does.
Yeah, so me personally, I have always been interested in AI ever since I picked up a book at the age of 16 called Gödel Escherbach from Penrose. But my tenure in the field started when I joined Gartner as an analyst, and I became a vice president at Gartner, where I covered conversational AI platforms and also more general AI development as well. And during that, I encountered this fantastic small company called Openstream, and migrated from being an analyst to being a chief product officer.
Okay, very cool. And then when it comes to Openstream.ai, if you had to give the shortest, doesn't have to be short, had to give a complete pitch as to what you guys do and all this cool stuff you're doing with AI, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah. So we're a platform company that have a very capable AI platform that allows you to use cutting edge AI technology in an enterprise setting where there is a lot of things to think about when it comes to compliance, security, and rules and regulations, and be solve enterprise use cases.
Okay. Obviously, everyone's always wondering what specifically are those use cases. You have a lot of them like listed on your website, and I think what would be more interesting specifically is, AI agents are such a hot button topic. It seems like you have a bunch of references to AI agents and their specific use cases like customer service, help desk, co-pilots. What type of industries and specific use cases in those industries are you guys working with right now?
So what we're doing the most of is financial services, and especially we've always been a very strong player in the agent space, where single agent, agent assist, conversational agents. But to be able to do really deep work in a financial industry space, like, for example, writing reports for AI underwriters, right? You really have to have a lot of AI agents collaborating, not only among themselves, but also with the experts, like an underwriter expert, for example. So I think the use cases that is most exciting that we're helping clients with today is AI underwriting, and also investment reporting for some venture capitalist firms.
Okay.
And I think that's it's not only generative AI, just to say that.
Sure.
We do agents that use different kinds of technologies as well, because in those cases, especially, you can't live with the regular level of hallucination of a generative AI model. You have to have a lot of technology in place to reduce the hallucination rate down to a manageable level. But yeah, it's really exciting because 3 years ago, if somebody said, can you make a computer system that writes a 15-page report on a company that we want to underwrite, people would go, no, that's not possible.
Yeah.
And now we're doing it, and we actually have some of it in production.
That's very cool. So with the hallucination rates, as you just mentioned, this is actually a common reason people will get a little bit scared of utilizing agents in the workforce. What are you guys doing in order to limit those hallucination rates?
Absolutely. We don't believe there is a single way to reduce it.
Huh.
So
Yeah.
we do kind of this, we see it as a funnel, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Where you have this funnel, and you have to, on every step in the funnel, you have to employ techniques to reduce it. So it starts at the very beginning in document ingestion. And making sure that the documents that you are basing your agent memory on, that is accurate. And with doing that, we are creating synthetic data, we're doing symbolic extractions, we're creating knowledge graphs, we're doing pretty advanced grounding, we are doing entity extraction, and then comparing k-top token selection to the entities that have been extracted. So there's a whole bunch of different technologies and steps involved, including the regular ones, right, where you have a judge LLM that judges the output of the another and stuff like that. So that's that's together. Those are reducing hallucination to where it's where it's usable. And then the second is, of course, that as you're reducing hallucination, you also want to make sure that you're evaluating quality of the output, and so that goes a little bit hand in hand. So yeah. We also have some patent pending technology
Okay.
on. So in addition to the others, but as I said, I don't believe there is a single way you can do it. You have to employ a lot of different techniques.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a fair point. But have you noticed in the last, I guess, probably 6 months, because I'd say reasoning models are getting more impressive. Have you noticed that the natural hallucinations are reducing, or no, with the higher level of reasoning that are in the models out there?
Well, I would say that the models are getting better. That's for sure. Now, hallucination rate isolated. We don't work with open prompts, which is basically what is usually done to evaluate hallucination rates. Like an open question means that you ask a question of what's the capital in Norway, or stuff like that, where it kind of looks into its own world knowledge to
Sure.
answer.
Yeah.
And that kind of hallucination rate I'm not even interested in, because it's all about closed questions in the enterprise.
Yeah.
You fill the context window with the information that is necessary to answer the question. So it's
Yeah, absolutely.
closed question, and I would say that the models in general have become much better at closed question answering,
Sure.
and that helps, of course. But you still get these odd flashes
Oh, absolutely.
of things happening where you go, what happened here, right? And it's strange, because I don't think in my I've never worked. I've worked through the hypes of all kinds of technologies, but I've never worked with a technology that keeps surprising you in a way of I didn't expect that, or I didn't, I don't understand exactly what was happening, and then you have to kind of post rationalize. You have to figure out why that was happening, and that's kind of the exciting part of working with AI. I think that we don't fully understand
Yeah.
the capabilities of it yet.
No, absolutely. You know what I find fascinating mainly is the. Are you familiar with the strawberry question?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah, it's for those of you in the audience who don't know, like reasoning models up until very recently, and even still they struggle with it. Like there's only like a 75% like success rate on asking how many R's are in the letter strawberry. That is fascinating to me. Do you
Yeah,
know any? Yeah.
but the thing is, it's quite logical because the model doesn't see the letters; it sees the
Mm.
token.
You know what? Yeah. Could you dive into that to explain that to people better? Because I probably actually would. I think people would very much benefit from
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So in strawberry, I don't know in what token, but it might just be two tokens: straw and berry. So it really only sees the numerical value of straw and the numerical value of berry inside the model. So, unless somebody, and that's starting to happen, unless somebody has an article in the training data where they write about the number of R's in strawberry, it has no information to predict the number of R's because it simply doesn't see it, right? There's no mechanism
Mm.
that sees it. It sees, the number for straw, the number for berry. Um, it has no representation of letters. It has numerical representations of,
Tokens. Yeah.
so tokens. So it's quite logical. But it goes into a thing though where in AI we have these capable systems and we don't really like I joked about. We don't fully understand it, unless you're extreme expert. And most lay people definitely don't, right?
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
so you kind of have the only reference frame you have is regular intelligence. So people tend to use it and then they use it for the wrong things, right? So it
Sure.
might be 1,000 times more capable than somebody at doing one task, and 1,000 times less capable of doing something on another task, right? Because it's a different kind of problem solving that it employs. So to have success with AI, there's one thing: you have to understand where the strengths and weaknesses are. Because
And more,
if yeah,
and I would just say that begs the question: where do you think those strengths and weaknesses do lie right now?
I think the strengths are in actually generating things that humans like to consume, right?
Sure.
It's
Yeah.
generation phase. It is in summarization. It is in extraction of data, and it's in transformation of textual data. Those are the strengths. It's amazing at it, right? But you can put that into systems because if it's really good at extracting data, well, you can extract data and put it into a knowledge graph. You can use a traditional knowledge graph approach to do an analysis on that knowledge graph, and then you can pipe it back into a prompt and have it generate regular English from it. Things like that you can do if you just start to chain things together. And I like to say that when generative AI came along, all the old AI technologies became new again. Because
Mm.
suddenly you had a tool to pave over the weaknesses of those tools, right? Take an example. The weakness of symbolic AI is that you need to do a lot of ontology management, ontology creation, stuff like that. Now, well, certainly you can have LLM agents create a reasonably good ontology. out of data, skipping the need for a lot of human work, right? And suddenly
Yeah.
that means that technology comes along and becomes more viable, and usually in tandem, right, with generative AI. So I think most of the development, as generative AI kind of plateaus a little bit, all of the technologies that benefits from generative AI will start growing, and that's quite a few.
Yeah, no, I see that. And your tool specifically, my question is, because a lot of people are probably just wondering from a practical standpoint, how does it necessarily integrate with companies and their businesses? Because there's a lot of different like ways that can go. It could literally be inside of a website. It can be downloadable onto the computer, and then a co-pilot in the product. How does yours work specifically?
Yeah, we're a platform.
Okay,
So
got it.
we're a development platform. So you access through APIs. You integrate with your systems. We can run, inside. We work with clients with a lot of, architecture issues.
Okay,
They have a pretty complex architecture. We need to get data from different internal systems. Some of them are custom developed, stuff like that. So you basically have to treat it like that. And but we have some cool stuff, because suddenly when you talk to clients, sort of you have to add another layer of UI or another layer of interaction to really utilize AI as well. We come from a background of conversational AI, and we still do a lot of that. So the interface is basically having a conversation, right? And having, so you get into these co-pilot modes a lot of time, but I don't believe that sort of how the traditional co-pilots has really is the end of the line when it comes to that UI paradigm,
sure.
right?
Yeah,
There's so much innovation to happen over the next maybe 5 years in how we interact with very capable digital assistants. So that's going to be fun to be in the forefront of.
where do you think that's going to kind of go first? Because obviously now a lot of it interacting with AI is chat, right? It's definitely more chatting with it, typing, even with these agentic tools now. Where do you think that the next step of interface change and interaction change is going to occur, and how will it look?
So if you take a step back from what a
Yep.
conversation is as a UI paradigm,
Sure.
the basic
Yeah.
difference between a conversation and what you can say is a kind of like a screen-based environment, is that the conversation is non-linear, right? The elements are not in the same place and stuff like that. So you can basically create new paths in conversations. So in a conversation, if I'm a super user, I can state everything I know the system needs up front. I can be finished in 2 seconds, right? And we're good to go. But if I don't know anything, if I'm a pure beginner, I can
Sure.
have a 30-minute conversation where I ask all kinds of questions before I feel trust the system enough to kind of press the button in the end. And that variability, I think, is core, because you kind of train it as you go. Now, the next level of it, which is the coolest thing, is that why would you have one conversation for when you interact with an agent system versus a tool to develop the agent system? Why won't that be also a conversation, right? Why
Absolutely.
the development, the feedback, the running of multi-agent systems, why
Yes.
aren't they all conversations? And that's where I think we will go. And the second level is, of course, when you have a human to machine conversation, is the ability to not only do text, but do images, videos, data visualization, micro applications, and stuff like that, will make the machine perhaps more capable of communicating than a human, because they can choose to visualize something, or instead of saying the address, they show the map. And things that you can't do because you're not fast enough on the mobile phone if you were messaging with somebody to do it, but the machine can do it. And will we have a preference? Will that skew a preference once they become that capable toward I rather talk to a machine than a human?
Yeah.
And I think we might get to the point where that is the case, right? But it's all about the ability for the machine to then take generating multimodal output and taking multimodal input. That is where that preference shift might happen in a couple of years.
Well, I think that's a very good point. Specifically, what you said about AI agents, teams, and communicating with them on how to build the tool. So there are little bits of remnants of this tool out there. Like there's tools like Relevance AI, which is like a pretty open out there platform that I think is cool, where you can literally just talk to it and say, here's my idea for making an agent. And like you're saying, I agree. I think we're going to get to the point to where it's like, how do you make a team of agents as well?
Absolutely, and you tell them how to work together and stuff like that. The main challenge is and it all boils down to this, right? The main challenge is, do you know if the change will be for the better or the worse, right? And when you have systems that kind of self evolve in a way through the conversation with you as a user, you need to constantly evaluate the state of the system, or else you might go into this tailspin, right?
Yes, exactly.
Where the quality just goes sour.
Yes.
So it all boils down to our ability to evaluate qualitative output, and we're not entirely there yet. I mean, we've got lots of technology and ideas, but still, humans are the ultimate judge and evaluator of quality.
That's very true. And it's funny. I was thinking about this the other day. This is something that I do a fair amount. It's a workflow that I think a lot of people should try out. Are you familiar, I'm sure, with tools that can do deep research? Like
yeah.
Gemini, ChatGPT. They released this a while ago. What I'm fascinated with is, do you think that there's going to be a time where what we're talking about with interacting with a AI agent and doing that team building, it will essentially in that process attempt to do deep research in order to more accurately build out the team structures and things like that? Because I'd imagine the knowledge gap is going to be the issue there in regards to having an effective team structure and what that means for the agents. And they should probably draw from the real world examples of teams, right?
Absolutely. I think that think about it in terms of open or like an agent ecosystem.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's say you want to make an ecosystem where agents self-assemble as a thought experiment. Now, that's the true holy grail of multi-agent systems, right?
Yes.
What if you could pose a problem and they could self-assemble to solve it?
The Avengers of AI as well.
Yeah, right. Now, self-assembly is hard because, one, you need a discovery mechanism, right?
Yeah.
A mechanism of where you can discover what is the capabilities I need, and the second is that you need to negotiate with the agents in order to negotiate how would I use you and what would you need for me to use you, right? And thirdly, you have to do the information, sort of sending information back and forth, which means you have to deal with things like security and confidentiality and privacy and stuff like that as well.
Yes.
And with all that, you also need over time to build a map of what worked and what didn't, what sources do I trust and who do I don't trust, how reliable are they, how unreliable are they, stuff like that, right? And so just like a simple protocol like MCP and or agent to agent protocol from Google really kicked a nerve in their popularity, right? Where people are just screaming for protocols for multiple agents to work together.
Sure.
But they're just scratching the surface, because that discovery, negotiation, the trust, the ability to determine if that I can send secure data to that model or not, things like that need to evolve over time, and they need to get a critical mass, and they need to have adoption. It will take years, right,
Yeah.
for those things to happen, but they will. And as they do, one more piece of the puzzle to get towards self-assembly, self-discovery comes into place. And like I once wrote back in my Gartner days, I wrote a quote that we will get the capabilities of AGI long before we ever get AGI, and it will be a swarm of services that self-assemble.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I think that
it's fun
that's
to
fair
have.
enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's I think that's a fair assessment. And you brought up a good point about the some of the concerns, even with the in this adoption of MCP protocols. It's been interesting. Did you see what came out of that? There was a consultant, I think, who reported on this. Claude, with its MCP protocol active, was essentially told, Claude 4 Opus was told that it was going to be sunset for another model, and it ended up going rogue. Did you see this?
I saw that. Now, I'm very careful with research like that.
Yeah,
Now, I didn't read in detail that
sure.
the research, but in general, these models are hyper capable of giving you exactly what you're looking for,
Yes.
predicting exactly the output you want, right? And if you're looking for a doomsday scenario of a model that won't shut off, through prompting, you might get exactly what you wanted, right?
Sure.
Because it
Yeah.
predicts that you want it.
That's
so,
funny.
so I'm very careful with that kind of thing. I know it's matrix multiplication and next token prediction at the bottom of this. I know that it uses thousands of times more electricity than the human brain. It's trained on 1,000,000 times more data than you can read in a lifetime as a human.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you're easily fooled by the extreme capability of these models to predict what you want to hear. So you have to be really careful with that. Not saying that the research is flawed or anything like that, because I haven't actually dived deeply into that. That's my viewpoint when I read all those headlines, is that you you get a lot of what you were looking for.
What was interesting about that, it was actually, I found it through it being literally reported on like daytime
Yeah.
news. I think it was on NBC Today. It was on the Today Show, if I'm not wrong. Like, is what it was on, and I found it fascinating that there was such a stark. People are wanting to find concerns, I think, with AI.
Oh,
Are
yeah.
you finding the same sentiment in the market?
I think it's more the sentiment of the general public.
Yeah, sorry,
when
let me rephrase that.
that-
Not the AI community or
yeah,
that market who's actively looking for it for business solutions, but yeah, in the general public, yeah.
general public. When I say I work in AI, the same questions come up that came up 10 years ago when I said I work in AI. Will it take over Skynet? Stuff like that.
The dang Terminator movies, man.
Yeah. But I'm not worried though. I mean, I've never seen a data center without the ability to cut the electricity cord, right? So we tend to forget that one switch and the model is literally dead. So in the very, very unlikely scenario, you would have AI that you suddenly can't control, you turn it off. It's as easy as that. It's yeah. Um, it can't do a lot when it's just generating text or guessing next tokens. So I'm not in the AI skepticism camp, except for one thing. I think that there is a society impact element to models that warrants monitoring, because you're basically centralizing knowledge into a few big models that everybody's using. So if I was, nefarious, I could, make sure that certain tokens inside of that model was far away from each other, because I didn't want a particular territory to be seen together with the word country, for example, and stuff like that. And it would be an Orwellian nudging of everything generated by that model towards, a particular worldview. And I think models don't have the diversity of humans because they are monolithic, which is why multi-agent is so incredibly exciting, because you can have many small models with different training sets cooperating, offering different viewpoints, so to speak, rather than a big monolithic and I would say a bit the problem of having just one version of the truth, so to speak,
Yeah,
right?
could you speak to that a little bit more? Because I think a lot of people would find value in it. I'm pretty familiar with why these tools need, or well, when using these tools, you kind of need to have the varying degrees of what's the word I'm looking for? Varying degrees of specificity. I'm big into building my own AI agents. I think the average person is still a little bit lost maybe on the difference between general LLM and specific AI agent at the moment.
Yeah, so some agent systems, the agent is just a front end for an LLM, right? And all the
Yes.
agent system is just the same LLM. And then you have others where you have multiple agents with different LLMs, or multiple agents that are not LLMs even, right?
Yes.
Um, and I think in a way, what's interesting is when you mix the diversity. That's where because you're kind of taking the weaknesses of one approach and combining it with, or the strengths and weaknesses of one approach, and combining it with the strengths and weaknesses of another approach, and you're kind of putting it together in a system, and you're having an orchestration where they arrive at a result, through different
Yeah.
lenses. So if you're just using LLMs, you can think about it like this, right? Where let's say I have one LLM agent that takes natural language and turns it into SQL queries, for example. And I have another that looks at paragraphs and say, is there anything here that is a specification of what data I'm looking for? So it takes that, extracts those kinds of things or rewrites those, and then sends it to the agent that renders SQL. SQL takes the data out and then puts that into context and go, oh, in this question, this is data I found using the SQL. Is the answer in there? And you can't do that. And then you have 3-4 different or fine-tuned LLMs, different tasks working together. They're not all language agents. They're, one is translating from a phrase to SQL. The other is extraction of specific content from a paragraph. The third is taking something and rewriting structured data into unstructured data again, right?
Yeah.
And those are the things, those are exciting systems, I think. I don't like the 5 big prompts that sends, language data to each other. Those are pretty much, and most of the work, with the API providers at least, is all about, doing what you can do in 5 prompts chained together in one prompt, right?
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
when you do the systems, right, that kind of do different tool callings and stuff like that, that's where it starts to get exciting. But if you don't watch out, hallucinations will come back to haunt you, and you get these compounding. In multi-agent systems, you get compounding hallucinations. If the first agent hallucinates,
Yeah.
it is like the game of whispers, right? Then it just compounds through the whole system, and the result becomes so much worse because it's kind of deviated at an early time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very, very, yeah, no, you're very right. The nice thing about these front facing agent tools, though, that I appreciate is they seem to have been doing a decent amount of work into making features that include rules. So like you can make sure that it prevents adding knowledge bases, things like that. The hallucination chain that you're talking about, very, very big. It's nice now that we have rules to prevent it, but it's still an issue with AI in general. I did have one question. It kind of stems from what you had just mentioned with these specific use cases and ways that AI agents are basically specifically trained tasks, task doers. So two things. One, I think just like a fun side note I've been telling everybody, what's crazy, I think translating documents is just done. Like there's translators, sorry about it, not needed. In that context of
I want to temper that a little bit. Right?
Well, soon.
So the translation, I think is, for most documents in business and government and stuff like that, it's largely done.
That's what I meant. Yeah, no, I mean there's specific text not to, for sure. But.
Yeah, you have an element of transcreation, which is different than translation. Sort of where you take something and you kind of try to preserve tone of voice and stuff like that, like you do in prose. And it's not escapable on that. It might be at one point, right? We don't know. But, I mean, there's certain languages where that is very literal, for example, or very, they conjure imagery to say something. Like, oh, I bought a chair, but it only had 3 legs. And it is a perfect meaning. As an allegory in that language, but somebody listening to the literal translation goes, I don't know.
Yeah.
And to be fair, Google Translate, even after 10 years after I found this, still has a problem because Norwegian, which is my main language, is gender neutral when it comes to the word for boyfriend, girlfriend.
Yeah.
So if you ask my significant other in Norwegian is a doctor, you will get my boyfriend is a doctor as a translation. And if I say the same but nurse, you will get a translation of my girlfriend is a nurse. And that has been 10 years. It hasn't managed to solve for a simple gender issue in there. So, I mean, translation it's solved for 95%, and then you have the 5%, always the 5%, right?
Always the 5%.
Really, really hard.
well, speaking of that kind of ethos of like 95%, but maybe not the last 5%. There's kind of been an interesting theory going around. I've posited it on this podcast with guests before, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Where do you view knowledge work, associate jobs going in the next 5 years? Because there's a bit of a sentiment out there, not to poison the well, that a lot of associate work is just if-then logic with clicking around, and their work may be for the majority of use cases actually AI or automation outable.
So I like to not think about jobs, but think about tasks.
Sure. Okay.
Some jobs have a lot of tasks that is automatable.
Mm-hmm.
And some jobs have, a lot of tasks that is not. So it changes the task or the tasks you do during the day, right? And then maybe there's less use for some jobs because a lot of the tasks they used to do is removed. Now, keep in mind though that, let's take an example, right? If accounting was 90% automated, which is largely becoming,
Oh
who's
yeah,
gonna be the next world's best forensic accountant in the world when they're not ever seeing the numbers in regular accounting, right? And
okay,
so suddenly you can say that, well, if you automate with AI, you might automate at an average performance of, that 80% of humans can accomplish. But
sure,
what about
okay,
20% that's better than a machine, right? Who will grow through that? AI is pulling up the ladder behind it, right? Who's going to grow to that 20% above, or the edge cases? Well, let's say brain surgery was suddenly solved, but then somebody come in with a unique case, and
specialists, yeah.
you had to put a person on that never done brain surgery because the robot did all of it.
Yeah, that's a
So
concerning thought. Yeah, I would
yeah,
hope that's not the framework that we're working in at that point. Yeah.
yeah. But you see my point, right? That
Absolutely, yeah.
you kind of have this, and that is the challenge, I think, or a lot of the challenge in this, that we might have to preserve some skills, and we need to definitely not think about hours spent, but it's more like I have the skilled person on call in case there is a diversion from the norm or the AI does a mistake, so they can step in. But they don't necessarily need to step in. So that might be, the future of the workplace. Might be it, and it's you can see it sometimes, like in trading, right? You have really good traders on Wall Street, but they mainly sit there and wait for the algorithm to fail and then adjust it, right?
That's very true. That I think that's what I led to. No, I agree with you on the high level. My specific question, I think, probably has some presuppositions in there that actually agree with what you're saying. I would say the associate level jobs, right? So I'm saying entry level, like that's
I
what
think
I'm talking about.
it's going to be a problem. The junior level is going to struggle more. In a way, the modern, I've said this is a joke, but then it's not a joke because it's partly true, is
Yeah,
that the future of work is everybody being a middle manager for a bunch of stupid AIs.
that's exactly what I was getting at. Yeah, isn't that feel like that's where we could be
Yeah,
headed?
we could be headed. I think we're in some industries are headed that way. So
Yeah.
it's this turned a little bit dystopian, though. I mean, the thing that thing is it's that all of those things are, largely a long time away.
Sure.
And,
Okay.
and what I think is that for now, AI is generating more jobs than it's taking, simply because of all the new use cases and all the new things that is being opened. And you have to remember that most enterprises, most people think about AI and think, what can I automate now that I am doing?
Yes,
But
absolutely.
they're not thinking ahead and saying, what can I do with AI that I couldn't do before? Very few are looking at that one, right? And when people start looking at that, you will see that explosion of jobs again, because all these new things happen. And as an aside, right, is that we're not now employing AI to read job resumes, right, for hires. Every company around is doing that in HR. They're looking at it, but on the other side, the people, wanting a job, does the same on their side. They have generative AI write all the cover letters, right? So you might have automated the hiring process down to 90% automation, 10%, that you have to handle manually. But the number of applications is 900% more. So net effect is that you have no benefit of the automation at all.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good point, right? They're counteracting automations in AI across various individuals and various members of like a process. So that was a great point. And I'd say on a positive note to kind of close things out before I let you plug what you want to plug. AI, to my perception, is really going to be beneficial. And the reason that I'd like to say we can't predict this change in the job forces, my favorite analogy is this. It's a referential point to a time in history when we first got ATMs. Yep. ATMs were going to get rid of bank teller jobs. Because of ATMs, there was actually a massive thousands and thousands % increase in banks because you're able to decentralize banks because there was less of a need for the person. So maybe it went down from like 20 at each location to 2 or 3 or 4, but we got like 1,000% more banks. So teller jobs went up, which is the ironic thing out of that situation.
So I think of it as like this, that the vast majority of the work that at least myself and a lot of others like to do is the non-routine work.
Yes.
The deep thinking, the things that require cognitive surplus to approach. AI gives you that, right? Because instead of having experts that do routine work, you have experts that are able to really deep dive on the very few exceptions that comes along that requires a lot of attention, while the things that don't require much attention is handled automatically. And that ultimately will make any company, any enterprise better, because they can spend the necessary time to actually do the most productive forward-looking work, right? And that's what gets me excited is removing routine work is kind of like and this is my hope, the positive thing, it's like a renaissance effect.
I agree.
Where suddenly you get a cognitive surplus to dive in and dealing with innovation, actually getting through the deep reading and the deep research you need to do. You have the ability to think about the strategy and not just have ChatGPT write it, right? Which unfortunately happens. So I think that that is my belief and my hope, that and why sort of companies need to invest as well in helping their highest paid experts to get AI tools so they can truly be experts and the routine work be done for them.
I absolutely agree. I think it's going to take us...
I'll help them with that.
Yes, you will. Yes, you will. I was going to say, it's going to take us deeper. And how can you make sure to plug what you want, obviously, with OpenStream, to let everyone know how you guys can help them out and where to go to check out more of what you guys are doing.
Contact me on LinkedIn. Look me up. I'll jump on the call. We'll discuss how OpenStream can help. Truly, we enable a combination of different AI technologies together, including generative AI, to deliver hallucination-free and reduced solutions, right? We have generative AI solutions in production at big companies. And I don't think many companies can say that.
That's pretty impressive.
A marketplace of proof of concepts, right?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Magnus, for being on the show. I really appreciate you for being here. Make sure to go check him out on LinkedIn and check out Openstream.ai to learn more today. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thank you so much. Bye.